Hi everyone, this is Richard. In this video, let's talk a little bit about the state of electronic medical records and some of the design decisions that have gone into them. And we just need a general idea of this in order to build upon just what we plan the next generation to look like. All right, so we need to know where we are and where we have been before we can determine where are we going to go. All right, so I did ask Copilot which generation of electronic medical records we're on. Like, is it 1.0, 2.0, 3.0? What is that? And Copilot said we are in the fourth generation of electronic medical records. And I completely disagree. I think we are in the first generation. It's not so important what number we put on it. It's more important why I'm saying what I'm saying. All right. So it would say, Copilot, that in the very beginning, the first generation was basically, it was the scheduling, it had billing, maybe it had a word processor on it, just the basics that was able to get some stuff from paper and put it onto electronics. But in my mind, by definition, it really isn't getting enough patient information to make a big difference. So back then we used paper charts all the time. So it wasn't really an electronic medical record at all. I would call that more proto-EMRs. All right, so back then, maybe up to the early to mid 90s, that's what I would call it. Then that's when the bigger electronic medical records were starting to come into play in the mid 90s, I believe. I think it was way before that even, but that's when it became popular. Let me just say, it became popular with me. Okay, so since I'm the hero of my own story, I'm going to put that out there. So they became around the 90s when these electronic medical systems, Epic, Cerner, Meditech, NextGen, I think, those came out around that time, big, huge systems. Since then, we have been having the same type, the same generation of EMR. They have not really changed significantly since that time. Even back then, we had systems that would tell scheduling, patient information, the problem lists, medications, allergies, the laboratory, plus or minus. So we had all of these features themselves in a working electronic medical record. And since then, it really hasn't changed much. In fact, I actually marvel over the decades about refactoring. You remember what refactoring means. Refactoring is you get the code, the underlying code, and you change it, not so that you change the functionality, but you change it so that the functionality can improve and expand in the future, right? So you're not breaking anything, you're just refactoring, changing it so that you have plans to change, add things in the future. In my use of these electronic medical systems, that has not been done at all whatsoever. Or if it has been done, I don't know. So I'm not making any statement. If this code in these systems have been refactored, they've done such a good job that it makes it look like they haven't been refactored. You know how sometimes you talk to a guy and he kind of sounds like he's lying? Maybe he's lying, maybe he's not, but he's acting like he's lying. So why is he acting like he's lying? I don't know. Maybe that's his personality. That's almost like the personality of electronic medical records in my mind. And we'll go over that in just a few minutes here. So we have basically the same thing, even many times the same view all over again. And many times, one of the biggest problems that me personally, I'm having with electronic medical records is the more features you add, the more work you do. And you might think, well, the more you add, the more you're supposed to do. But it doesn't always have to be that way, but it is. So in other words, like for example, if there's actually over here I left out a healthcare maintenance section. If there's a healthcare maintenance section, many times what you have is healthcare maintenance somewhere along here. You click on it, and then you have to go to a different area. Then you have to click down there, and you have to click down here, and they have to click down there. And the more things you add, the more ways down the line you have to start clicking and clicking, and it just keeps going on. And then as the decades are going, there's more requirements in medicine. You want to make sure to check for the vitals. You want to make sure to check this, that, imaging, whatever it actually is. And so the list gets longer and longer. It gets harder to read. It slows things down. So, and it's anytime you do one task in electronic medical records, it's never just a click. It's several clicks down the line. All right? And that's really annoying. But that problem hasn't changed over the decades. It's gotten worse because there's more things to do. But again, you might say, well, wait a minute. Of course, if you have to do more things, you have to do more things. But is that actually true with anything else, right? If you go to the store and you buy 5 heads of cabbage as opposed to one, do you have to click or scan or whatever the heck you have to do or weigh 5 heads of cabbage every single time? You weigh it and then you pay for it. You weigh it and then pay for it. No, of course not. To buy 5 heads of cabbage is not any more difficult than buying one. So doing more stuff is not more difficult. Well, then you might say, well, that's not a good equivalent. No, it's not a good equivalent. But the whole concept is the store many times does the work for you. So now you could scan things by yourself. So now you don't have to wait in line. So now they're changing the software that they use and you use to make the system more efficient so that the more work you do, it's not actually more work. And so that's what the important point is. But with electronic medical records, it doesn't seem that way. It seems the more work that there needs to be done, it exponentially goes up because there's a lot more clicks that follow. That can be changed with refactoring, but I don't see any evidence that it is at all so far. One of the other problems with electronic medical records is, oh, by the way, I'm just a side note, how I made ZebraHoof, it's a little bit different. So we have a patient section. This is just off topic, okay? There's a patient section, and then there's an office section. So you think about what you do in the office, the business part of it, not always business because it's related to the patient, but it's not related to a particular patient. And then there's a section where it's related to a particular patient. And so that makes it a little bit harder in and of itself to accidentally go into different people's charts. So sometimes we're like, we do something and we're on the wrong patient. Well, this makes it a little bit harder for that to actually do. You have to get out of each chart, and you can only open up one chart at a time. But it's nice because it's quick. It's responsive. Unlike many of the big EMRs, you click on it, you have to wait 2 or 3 seconds every single time. Gets a little bit annoying. Okay, so that's just a design decision that I made. I don't know if it's better or worse. I haven't had time to really test it out, but that's what I decided to do. So what other aspects of the electronic medical records is information can be hidden right underneath a click, right? So many times we have to click on different areas. There might be a particular problem that's hiding right here. Like there's an imaging that shows something really bad going on inside of there. But unfortunately, I won't see it because I'm clicking everywhere else except for that. Why didn't I click over on the imaging? Well, I just didn't have the time. I just didn't think of it, right? It was something I didn't know I needed to know. And so I missed it itself. And something like that is very possible to happen. I'm surprised it doesn't happen all the time. I don't know if it does or not, but I wouldn't be surprised. And so that's one of the things that we have to keep in mind with all of this information. It's information which I'm supposed to have is hiding behind a particular click. And sometimes a patient would tell me, I took some medication a few years ago. I don't know what it was called. I think it helped. I'm not positive. So I have to go back into the notes, scroll back all the way back. Scroll all the way down here, and read it back and forth to figure out what it was. That's kind of annoying. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it happens, it's really difficult to do. Okay. What Copilot said was one of the features that lent to the sharing of information that led to the next generation of electronic medical records was that it was about sharing information. So what happens specifically with some of these things, like Epic, for example, if you had 5 different hospitals using Epic, you could get the patient information from Epic. It would get uploaded somewhere on the cloud. I really don't know where. And you could download it into your system if you're using Epic. And so that's their version of information sharing. And therefore, that's generation 4th or 3rd or something like that. But to me, in my mind, that seems a little weird because that's not what's happening at all. It's not sharing electronic medical record. It's just keeping it within the Epic ecosystem, right? So it's kind of like Apple messaging, but the difference is Apple messenger. You can actually send messages outside of Apple, right? So, but you can't do that with electronic medical records. It's a walled garden, I think that's what they call it, but it's a really, really big walls. So there's really no information sharing at all whatsoever. So, and plus, it hasn't really changed the fundamentals of the application itself, right? You're just adding a feature that isn't really sharing information. not in the normal, in the everyday, every world sense. It's like saying if you have a Gmail account, you can only send email to somebody with a Gmail account. I mean, it seems silly in everything else, but in medicine, that's the state of what it is. So we'll just have to keep that in mind. So I don't call that the next generation. I think it's still the first generation for those reasons. If you want to disagree with me, that's fair enough. But at the same time, it's just the idea of these systems haven't changed a lot, and they have some fundamental problems over the past several decades. One more thing I'm going to add, one of the interesting features, which is very significant in my mind because we deal with it every day, is the difference between a medication list and a prescription history. I haven't used every medical record system out there. I've used a lot. And many of them cannot determine the difference between a medication list and a prescription history. We know what the difference is, right? But the electronic systems cannot do it. So a medication list, I want to know what medicines they should be on. Prescription history, what prescriptions did you write? So on the medication list, you should be able to just see medications that a patient's taking that you didn't prescribe, and you shouldn't have duplicates of it because unless they're taking duplicates of the medication. But a prescription history, because you prescribe a same medication multiple times, if you just go by a prescription history, it's hard to read because you have 5 different medications, same medication, and you don't necessarily want to delete it because if you delete it, it makes it easier to read. But if you delete it, you might actually cancel the prescription at the pharmacy. So it's very difficult, it's very easy to mix up. So it's something that you have to read the medication list constantly, check for any mistakes themselves, leave it alone because it's a sloppy mess. But that's one of the really big weaknesses, which refactoring can solve that. But because it's not been done, it's not been done. All right. That's my view of the current state of electronic medical records today. First generation. Let's go on and keep going down this path in terms of what's next. Thanks.